Welcome back, everybody. It's my very big honor to introduce a very special guest, Dr. Scott Mesh. He's a dear friend of mine, and I'm very excited to have him here today. Scott founded Los Niños in the New York area, and he has diagnosed over thousands of children in his role as a clinical psychiatrist and very big personality and a big advocate for young children and their early support. So welcome, Scott Mesh, to ApexINSPIRE Autism Summit today.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's an honor, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm very happy to share from my years of experience working with parents who are going through the transition of initially obtaining evaluations and determining what services might be needed for their child.
This is super. Well, before you go in, maybe if you can talk about just a few minutes how you even got started in your journey.
The way I got started with the agency is I didn't know any better. So I was like other people, started agencies. Maybe I could do that too. So it would have been good to have an MBA, know a little bit about accounting and things like that. But what the heck, we learned along the way. We just had a big desire to help children. The reason we named the company Los Niños Services is because my partner and I are bilingual psychologists, and our desire was to help the underserved Spanish-speaking families in New York City, uptown in the boogie down Bronx, and basically to really make a difference to families who were not receiving services. What happened over the years is that everybody wanted our services, and we kept the name.
Super. And then how many people are you servicing now? I know you built a phenomenal organization with great culture, like a really solid team. So how many people are you helping right now in the bigger New York area?
Well, thank you so much. So we have about 300 staff, and they provide home care, as well as we have a few centers where we serve children. So we reach around 2,000, mostly 2-year-olds every year.
Wow, that's such an important services. Well, I don't want to hold you back from your presentation that you prepared today, and I want to give you the stage right now. So please welcome everybody, Scott Mesh from Los Niños.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to be speaking today about how to help parents overcome fears in early childhood special education. If you are a parent, then I'm speaking directly to you about some of the questions, concerns, or fears that you may have. Maybe you've already started the evaluation process. Maybe you're receiving treatment already, and you may still have some nagging concerns. Or if you are a professional who works for parents, then the same issues apply. And then I'm going to be speaking to you in terms of these are some of the ways to respond to parents' questions, concerns, or fears. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we went over that. I'm a clinical psychologist and developed an expertise in diagnosing young children. And I also run our sister company, Young Child Learning, which came out of Young Child Expo Conference, conference that we ran for 17 years until the pandemic. And we have about 1,500 people come from around the world in every state in 20 countries. And it was rated number 5 conference in the United States in early childhood, and also taught. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. Just a little bit about my background, and let's go to the next slide. Great. So if you're a professional, I'm going to share words that work that help parents. And if you're a parent, again, I'm just going to share words that may help you in your journey. Next. So just a little bit about early intervention and preschool special education. Early intervention is special education for children from birth to age 3. Preschool special ed is for 3 and 4-year-olds. They're government administered programs. They're very, very similar. The major difference is on the bottom. You'll see that early intervention has service coordination, case management. Preschool does not. And in terms of this information is for New York City, and wherever you are, whatever state you are, just Google early intervention or preschool special education in your state, and you'll get the number to call to initiate a referral. Okay, next slide. And basically the process is, similar in both preschool and early intervention. In the case of early intervention, a service coordinator is assigned that's going to walk you through the whole process. The parent chooses an evaluation agency, evaluations happen, parents are informed about the results, and then there's a meeting where the services are approved. My tip is, in terms of parents being informed, parents should be fully informed. That is your opportunity to have all of your questions answered about the evaluations. You want to get your questions answered before the meeting, because then you can have a more effective meeting. Also, the government officials may approve or not approve certain services, and the parent has a significant role in this process. If the government does not approve services, then certainly you should know your rights. Again, you can get those online so that you can fight for what you believe your child deserves, including if you don't agree with an evaluation, you can ask for a second opinion that the government needs to provide, and then services begin. Next slide. So when often parents are unhappy when a child is ineligible. In addition, parents might say yes, but maybe might have concerns and then don't really want to proceed. But they may not tell the pediatrician that. They may not feel comfortable having a conversation. Or sometimes parents don't follow through, or they just won't accept the recommendation. For example, maybe they'll say it's only speech, and they are not interested in accepting a recommendation for services for a child maybe that the professionals believe has autism. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So for the professionals here, just think about it. Lead with your heart. Yes, I'm a clinical psychologist, and in addition, when one of our 3 children seemed to have a delay, we got evaluations, we went through it, we were in the field, so we know all about it, and it was still difficult to face the process of accepting the child has special needs. And then what we did was we worked hard to get all the services needed. In our case, we're very fortunate. Our child has done very well and became a success story. They had speech, OT, PT, special ed teacher, and now our child is doing quite well in high school. So focus on solutions, not problems. Be open. Realize that parents are in control, and it is up to them to accept services or not. And if we believe a parent is perhaps in denial, well, parents are going through a process, and you can assist, you can support. but it's not for us to force parents to do something. I like the acronym ABA, but instead of applied behavior analysis, I like to think of always being agreeing. So most people like it when we agree with them. So it's best to aim for agreement where we can, and that helps the conversation when there are things that maybe we don't see eye to eye in, and provide hope. Remember, you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. This is something that's very helpful to share with parents. Now, the challenge is that if special needs are not treated, um, it can lead to bad outcomes. Next. So, for professionals, realize that the time that you have with parents, it might be a 5 or 10 minute conversation, but if this conversation is done well, maybe the parents are more open to services or evaluations, and that could make all the difference. If parents do not go through the evaluation process and receive services, when is the next time they might be interested? Months, a year, years? And that time that they don't spend having services for their child is time that we can't go back to. Next. This is a letter that I received from a parent, which was wonderful. And I'm not going to read it, but basically it was thanking me. I was at the home of a child who had severe autism. I was there for about 2 hours. I didn't have to spend the extra half hour discussing with the parent. The parent didn't really want to hear my opinion. They weren't happy about it. They wanted to tell me, no, things are really not that bad. Everything's, it's just a little speech issue. And I thought this hour that I spend could change this child's life. I stayed there. And then when I left the home, I'm thinking, what are you doing? Staying with a parent that really doesn't want to hear this. I could have just left and said, read the evaluations. But then 2 months later, I received this letter which thanked me profusely for spending the time opening their eyes. And the mom said, before I had eyes, but I couldn't see. And if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have gone and researched and gotten help from my child, which made a difference. So that made me feel it's really worth it to spend that time and effort with parents because it can make a difference. This is just the type of letter. Let's move on. It is the professional's responsibility to educate and advocate. And it's also the parent's right and responsibility to act on the recommendations or not. It is their choice. Next. So this is a video I won't play today, but beautiful video online about a parent's journey. Okay. So the first question, is something really wrong? Maybe I should just wait. Next. So my response is, don't wait, evaluate. Now, parents might say, well, my child is just different. Or maybe a pediatrician might say, or a friend of the family. Different is okay. Delayed or disordered is not okay. And the question is, can we do something about it? Also, sometimes parents say, well, I don't want to compare. It's not right to compare. Well, we're not talking about comparing like a 15-year-old to another and having a conversation like that affecting their self-esteem. We're talking about a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old. And in fact, the only way we can determine if things are okay or not okay is by comparing to other children of the same age to determine, is this child in the ballpark of what we're expecting for their age? Ballpark, not exactly, but ballpark. Okay, I'm going to share more about that later. So, is something really wrong? Well, you don't have to diagnose the child, and the pediatrician doesn't either. The only thing you need is just to have concerns, and if you have a question, my advice is get an answer and let the developmental specialist give their opinion. Next. So here's something, if you remember this, you'll be ahead of like most pediatricians that are probably not familiar with this. Just remember 110, 100. What does that mean? That means at age 1, children typically start to say their first word. At age 1.5 or 18 months, children have 10 words more or less. At 2 years old, about 100 words more or less. So my child was 2 and had 0 words. Is that in the ballpark? No. Children should have around 100 words. If they have 99 words, don't worry. 98 words, don't worry. If they have 90 words, 80 words, okay, we're in the ballpark. But it just gives a quick guide to, are we in the ballpark or not? There are some signs of autism here, and these are some of the important ones. One of the most important I've found in my experience is a lack of pointing, especially after 18 months, but even earlier. Communication is in words, and communication is nonverbal. If a child is pulling you to something, or pulling your hand, not even pointing, or they're not even indicating when they're hungry. Ask mom, how do you know when your child's hungry? I don't know. I just provide something. This is not typical. Okay, next. Can I afford it? Next. The answer is these services are free. Children from birth to age 21 are entitled to a free and appropriate education. That means if there's special needs, the government has to provide. The only issue there is that the amount of services varies tremendously from state to state and country to country. Next. Now, a label. Many people are concerned about a label, and in fact, there's many people in special education which scare parents by telling them, well, they're going to have a label. You sure you want that? Okay, here's my answer. Next. A label or diagnosis alone is not going to hurt your child. Okay, why? Parents have parent rights. What that means is when a child is in early intervention under the age of 3, ideally children will be identified with some issues before that. There is going to be a file. It is going to sit in a file room, and no one is going to have access to that. So the label is not going to affect a 2-year-old who's developmentally delayed, and they're not going to be aware of what that means, and it won't go to anyone else if you don't want it to. Okay. So, and it's best to speak with parents about their fears and try to get specific about what the fear is and what's the reality associated with that fear. Go ahead. What about a record? Okay. So, as I said, the records won't be released unless the parent gives their written authorization, even to go to preschool special education. A parent may say, no, I don't want to have evaluations, or I don't want the records to go. Maybe they do want evaluations by preschool special ed when the child is 3, but they don't want the records. I don't recommend this. I think it's helpful for the professionals to see the history, but again, it's up to the parent to release the records. Next. Will special education hurt my child? Well, My response is early childhood special education is not going to hurt your child. It's going to help your child. Why? Therapists work well with children, some better than others. However, they'll be assisting the child in moving ahead, no matter where the child is. You might think the child is here. Maybe the therapists think the child is here. That doesn't matter. What matters is that we're just moving forward and pushing the child ahead no matter where they are. So the importance is not the diagnosis. The importance is the intervention and moving a child forward. It's not going to hurt the child. What is the worst case scenario? Oh my gosh, the therapist, they're not going to be good. Well, you don't have to continue with that therapist, and you don't have to continue with the agency. And in early intervention, you're going to be present if it's home care. So you're going to see exactly what goes on, and you can stop working with them at any time. Next. So will somebody force me to accept intervention? And the answer is no. It's a voluntary program. You can stop services at any time. And for parents that are really concerned about special ed, I agree with them. Always be agreeing. So, I have concerns about special ed as well. And I'm concerned about special ed later. That is why I recommend special education early, because by getting services early is the best opportunity to avoid special education later. So let's try to address everything as early as possible. Okay. Will I regret it? My answer is you won't regret getting services, but you might regret not getting services. Unfortunately, I've seen many parents that delayed or did not receive services for quite some time, and then they did regret because they could have done something and made a bigger difference early when it can matter the most. Remember, we can't go backwards in time. If we miss this opportunity, it's missed, and then it's harder to address later. Check it out. Don't miss out. So, how can they evaluate my kid? They were only with him for an hour. Well, trained evaluators know young children, and it's not just about working with the child. Some parents might say, well, my child wasn't at the best, or you're a male evaluator, you're a female evaluator, you're not from my culture, you're not from my race, etc. Okay, well, or my child was tired or didn't have a good night's sleep. Okay. First of all, parents are interviewed extensively. And so the evaluation for a young child is very different than an older child. A first grader, a fifth grader, they're going to take the child, they're going to go and do the evaluation, and that's it. With a young child, by nature, because the child is not able to express themselves, the parent has to be interviewed. And then, if you're able to have the parent on board feeling that, yes, this is more or less how my child is typically, great. And if not, then you have to evaluate the child on another day, possibly with a different person, so the parents can feel comfortable that, yes, it was valid. And in a worst case scenario, then parents can request another evaluation, another evaluator, maybe another agency. Next. Will it make a difference? Absolutely, it makes a difference. The only question is whether it makes a little bit of difference or a lot of difference. But virtually all children are helped. The only question is how much. Next. Is it true once in special ed, always in special ed, and that I won't be able to get my child out? Well, the answer is it depends. Most children learn a lot, And is it the fault of the therapy? Some children will need special education throughout their life. So if that's true, it's better earlier and give as much as possible. So the question is, if a child is in special later, is that the fault of the therapist? I don't think so. Next. Okay, next slide. Okay. So basically, these are words that I found to be so helpful with parents. When in doubt, check it out. Don't wait, evaluate. First assess and then address it. And my all-time favorite, you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. If you don't agree with the evaluations, you can have a second opinion. And even if services are recommended, you do not have to consent. So get an opinion. You can't go backwards in time. Very, very critical. And there is a golden window of time where you can make a huge difference, and that's the earlier the better. When a child is 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, the earlier you can make a difference, the earlier you intervene, the easier it is to make a difference. Next. So also, parents are concerned about doing the right thing. What is the right thing? So us professionals, we need to tell the parents, absolutely, you're right. You're doing the right thing. You're a caring parent. I see that. And what is the right thing? To check things out. Get a professional opinion. You're in control. You have parents' rights. This is voluntary. So you have to make the decision, and professionals can recommend. Things are confidential. And you can stop intervention at any time. I don't recommend it, but it is an option. I worked with one family who the child was almost 3. When I walked out of that home, I remember that mother was really not happy. Uh, she was really not happy. Out of the blue, 3 years later, I got a call. And the mom told me where she lived, and I recalled that evaluation. And I recalled leaving the home, and that mom was really not happy with me telling her, your child has autism, and it's really significant. What did she do? She calls me 3 years later, says she wants me to reevaluate the child. And I said, well, weren't you unhappy? Well, yes, I was, but I want you to reevaluate my child. I reevaluated the child, and after 3 years, the child has no signs of autism. I asked her about her journey, and what she told me is, yes, she was very upset. However, she wanted to do the best for her child, and so she gave the child services. And she didn't like certain therapists. She fired therapists left and right. And you know what? She was right, because those therapists were not good. And she wasn't a professional. She didn't know the field, but her perception was they weren't helpful. And she got the best therapists, and they made a tremendous difference. So you're in control. Next. Final thoughts. It's not your fault. Why do children have developmental delays? We wish that we knew, but we really don't. It just happens. However, you can help your child learn and grow and make a huge difference by intervening early. Okay, so why don't we pause it there, and these are other resources. So we'll just, why don't we take off the screen share and open up the floor to questions. And Susan, how are we doing this? Are we doing this via chat?
Yes, we have some questions here that I'm going to share here. So
Okay.
we have one question coming from Texas. And the question is, I have the following question
I
when
see
working
it.
with the school.
Mm-hmm.
Should a parent have a counselor with them when talking with the school?
So there's nothing wrong with having a counselor, a friend, somebody in your family speaking to the school. Absolutely. So there's nothing wrong with you having an advocate. And as a parent, my advice is do your best to be open and listen to what people are sharing. You don't have to agree, but just be open and listen to their thoughts. If it makes sense to you, great. And if it doesn't, ask for other people to assist. What should parents do when services are not approved, but they strongly feel like their child needs them? So, you may have heard me earlier, and absolutely ask for a second opinion. One of the things I've experienced too many times, and I get very aggravated, is when there's a situation where there were evaluations done before and the child was not approved for services. And my thinking was, I don't know how they could not have been approved. They really should have been approved. And that parent and child lost valuable time. Ask for reevaluations. It's your right to do that and paid for by the state.
Super. That's great. Scott, what are some of the potential solutions that parents can tap into when they do have concerns? Because when you do have concerns, it's kind of overwhelming, right? Taking care of a young child in itself, with or without developmental delays, it's a challenge for every new parent. But when they are struggling with the extra time it will take to find out these extra, evaluations or assessments, what have you seen what works for those parents?
Well, one thing is in terms of putting in the time, my advice is absolutely make it your priority to do everything you can for your child. Make sure you get those evaluations, you go through the process. Now, part of your question was sort of implied, what if the result is not what you expect? And for example, we were talking about what if services are not approved or the evaluator didn't come up with a diagnosis that you feel your child absolutely needs. Definitely consider going for a second opinion, but there's something more than that, which is many people in our field are helpful and competent. But like any field, there's a range of people. Some evaluators are better than others. Some service coordinators are better than others. Some agencies are better than others. So if you feel you're not getting the best care, certainly you can switch agencies, service coordinators, evaluators. And another thing that you should be aware of is that there are agencies that are advocacy agencies. They are staffed by advocates and lawyers. So if you believe that you are not being treated the way you should be by the system, then you can go to one of these agencies. In New York, we have an agency called Advocates for Children. It's been around at least 50 years or so, staffed by lawyers and advocates. So you bring your case there. But first, see if you can't work in the system, but don't wait too long. I wouldn't give it a week, but I wouldn't give it a year either. Don't give it 6 months either. After a reasonable amount of time, weeks, month, two, you're not getting answers that you feel are helpful, then move on.
Super. We have another question when it comes to bilingual children, because sometimes when they acquire two languages, I have it in my home. I have a 3-year-old, so she doesn't have 1,000 words in English, but she has several in German. So, what is the delay there, or even when you do have an evaluation, should they have an interpreter
Well,
there?
yeah, absolutely. So this is a very important question, and one that I'm familiar with. And my home is bilingual as well. My wife and I speak Spanish, Initially, my mother was really, really annoyed with me because for the first 2 years of our first daughter's life, we only spoke Spanish in the home. We wanted to give her the head start because we knew English would come in and she would pick that up. And my mom couldn't speak to her little granddaughter. So certainly after a year or two, a lot of English came in. But in terms of evaluations, whenever possible, of course, it's ideal that the evaluator is bilingual in this language. However, there's shortage of therapists, there's shortage of evaluators, national teacher shortage. You may not have a bilingual person. So absolutely an interpreter should be used. Now, a question is how much a child is bilingual. So I've had so many instances. Most of the evaluations that I conducted were bilingual. Bilingual. I've had interesting experiences. I go into a home, family perhaps are immigrants. They really don't speak English. So I'm speaking Spanish with them. And I ask, is your child exposed to English? No, no, we only speak Spanish. And then I spend a little time with the child, and of course, you have to test in both languages. You can't just take a parent's word for it. And the child's responding in English. So think about it. Children in the United States tend to watch TV in English, even if the homes are Spanish. They may be watching Spanish channels, German channels, French, whatever it might be. Toi, tui, ga, whatever other languages. But often, they'll see something in English, and that exposure helps. So it has to be tested. You can't assume anything, and a bilingual evaluator is certainly the ideal whenever possible, as opposed to an interpreter. Is it harder to diagnose a bilingual child with speech delay? So there's been a lot of conversation about this. Some people have spoken to a normal bilingual delay, but I think we're talking about a relatively small amount if there is a delay. Certainly, there's tons of literature now in the last 30 years about the bilingual advantage, creating more neural pathways, and child needs to learn more because you have to learn like double the words in both languages. So over time, I think it's generally accepted that there's an advantage. And if a child is 1.5, 2, how much do they understand in both? And is there a delay? So it's very tricky to diagnose. However, we're looking at the big picture here. One of the things that I love about early childhood assessment is it's so difficult. It's really challenging because, well, is it that it's bilingual, or is it this reason or that reason, or so forth? So it is tricky, and the focus is the ballpark, okay? We're not trying to determine, well, does the child really speak 98 words or is it 97? That doesn't matter much.
Mm-hmm.
It matters if the child has 0 words, like my child, or 10 words, or 50, or 80, or 100. So we're looking for the ballpark, so we don't have to get super, super precise. We just want to know clearly that we estimate that there's a significant delay in order to get services.
Yeah, super. Well, we're almost running out of time. It's so interesting. I think I could spend another hour with you. We have one more question, and then I think we have to say goodbye to you for today. And I hope that we can have you back in the future. So interesting. So the last question here is, what would you say is the first service that the parent should look for following a diagnosis when they don't even know where to start?
So if you're going through a government program like early intervention or preschool special education, you are supposed to be guided through the process. So you're not on your own. If you receive a private evaluation, the evaluator should really provide direction for next steps, not only a diagnosis, but there should be next steps. What are the recommendations? And in terms of where to start, I would try to obtain all the services that are recommended. So if a child has autism, then most likely there's going to be some kind of significant intervention, be it ABA services or floor time services or whatever the modality. And then in addition, most likely there should be speech therapy at a minimum. Sometimes occupational therapy is recommended, maybe physical therapy. So,
So
I
go with
would go through all of them in terms of if there was really, really a priority. The services for a child with autism would be the autism specific services, meaning special education teacher, therapist, whoever's providing ABA, floor time, or any of the other therapies that are out there.
Super. Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate your time, you sharing your wisdom with us today, and I'm looking forward to many more interactions in the future.
Susan, it was a real pleasure, and anyone can get in touch with me through losninos.com. Just send something on the website. I would be happy to respond. Susan, it's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Wow, what a great presentation. And I'm very, very excited now to present and welcome our next speaker, Hannah Michaelsen. And Hannah is here today with us from the program. Okay, I'm going to restart here. I'm still so moved by the previous presentation. So Hannah is the program director at the Care Parent Network, which is a family resource and empowerment center serving the Contra Costa County in the San Francisco Bay Area. So Hannah first received support from CARE when her son was first diagnosed with autism. And her journey and everything that she's learned, she has prepared today for us to speak to you. And I want to welcome Hannah to the stage. Welcome, Hannah. I think you're...
Hi, Gwen. Thanks for having me today. I hope this is just the tail end of that other presentation drove a lot of parents. And I hope I'm not on video or glitching. So hopefully we'll be okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
In my life to present, so whatever seems to work the best. I don't know if the slides are ready to launch now. I'll see if it'll let me do Okay, let's try this. Okay.
I'm going to give you the stage. Wonderful.
Let's see. Hopefully this will. Oh, 13. Perfect. Oh, I guess that was mine. Oh, goodness. Let's try this one more time. It looked like it was going. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. You know what? Launched. Let me see if I can do it from my screen. Hang on one sec. No, that's not going to work either. Okay. I had some slides, and it's just going to take me too long, I think I don't want to cut into our time, but I'm happy to go through some of what I was going to share with you today. As Susan said, I'm a family resource director in the state of California. We are part of a statewide network of about 47 or 48 family resource centers. All of us are part of the Early Start system here in the state of California. And then a lot of us also have designation as a family empowerment center by the California Department of Education. My agency serves a little over 2,000 families every year, families just like mine and just like all of you. I was going to start with a document that's called Welcome to Home that a lot of you might be familiar with, but it is how I framed the presentation for today. As you may have heard it, but I feel indulged me. It's that I often have to try to experience a child with a disability to try to help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it and imagine how it would feel. It's kind of like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks, you make wonderful plans, the Colosseum, Michelangelo's David, the gondolas in Venice, you learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After several months of anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland and there they must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you must meet a whole new group of people you never would have met. It's just a different place, and slower pace than Italy, less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice Holland has windmills. Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming in from Italy, and they're bragging about what they had there. And for the rest of my life, you say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's it. And the pain of that will never, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very significant loss. If you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to go to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special and the very lovely things about Holland. And so I wanted with that to tell you a little bit about my tour guide, my son. He is 20, and I had a beautiful picture of him, so hopefully we'll be able to share that with all of you at some point. My son was diagnosed almost 18 years ago. He was a little over 2 years old. We were expecting my second child, our daughter, as we were going through the assessment process. He was our first child, first grandchild. There were not a lot of red flags for us as parents, that there were delays in his development and reasons to be concerned. But luckily we had concerned family members who said, you might want to get this checked out. And so we started investigating where to get an evaluation, where, learning to navigate that system. We received an evaluation with a state department here in the state of California called the Regional Center System, and it serves individuals with developmental disabilities. And he qualified for early intervention preschool, and that's where we very first heard the term autism. And I was like, wait, what? Like, we're just here for a speech delay. But quickly, as we started researching about autism, we realized that probably was what he had. And so we had an evaluation soon after our daughter was, and even though it was hard to hear a professional who has evaluated your child say that, you're flying to Holland now, your son has autism. And so he started attending early intervention preschool. We started getting connected with other parents. We didn't have anybody in either of our families who had an individual with autism. There was somebody we kind of knew in our church congregation, but that was about it. And so we started getting connected to other families. And I think that's a really important step in any evaluation and diagnosis journey, is getting connected, because you need to feel like you're not alone. And there's real power in that. And so he did, with early intervention, where we would have APs. Now he's in an adult transition program through our school districts. He goes to next. He loves, still would watch Sesame Street if we let him. But he's a wonderful young man and loves to hug everybody that he comes in contact with. COVID was tough when all of our services stopped. And I think, like a lot of parents, we became parents, speech teachers, occupational therapists, behaviorists, all the things. And gradually those services have been added back in person for Spencer. He has 2 years left in the adult transition program, and then we're starting to look at what the programs and potentially additional job training might look like for him. So that's a little bit about my tour guide, Spencer, who's taken me on this journey to Holland. I now wanted to talk a little bit about coping, grief, and persistent trauma, which I know are kind of heavy topics, but I think they're important for parents to understand. I know when I realized in going through some parent training that some of the feelings of loss I had about my son, and still continue to have periodically, is a part of the grieving process. Grieving is not saved for those who have experienced a physical loss of a loved one, but it is also for that loss of a dream. In coping, sometimes parents make causal attributions. What caused this disability? I think early on, that's where a lot of us want to go. Was it something we did as parents? Was it something I did when I was expecting him? And most of the time, there's nothing that we did or didn't do to cause this disability. It's just something that happens in development. When parents feel a sense of control or mastery, that can be a helpful place to grow from. People who believe in their ability to cope with challenges are more likely to take action. And it isn't hard to feel like you're in a stuck place, because as the previous presenter talked about, you need to get those evaluations. Time is precious, and not to beat yourself up over, why didn't we catch this 6 months sooner? You're doing what you can now, and you move forward. Some parents, find it helpful to read everything they can about their diagnosis. A lot of time, I think that's sustainable and can lead to burnout. I know when our son was diagnosed, and this was a long time ago, there wasn't as much information on the internet, and so we were searching what we could and buying off Amazon. And I felt like all I had to do for about 6 months was eat, sleep, and drink autism. And I realized that wasn't a sustainable place for me to be. And so learning to find that balance for me was really important. I still was going to learn all that I could, but I also needed to balance that out with things that made me feel like me, and that gave me a break and helped me live a full and balanced life. Sometimes social comparisons are helpful actually for parents, because they compare themselves with other parents who are going through something similar. And I think those really can decrease feelings of isolation. I know in my social circle, the play group we were involved in, nobody else had autism. And yet when I met other parents of children with autism, I kind of felt like, okay, if she can do it, so can I. Or, at least I'm not alone. And sometimes we would realize, if you saw parents with more significant, there's my handsome son, thank you. If we, yeah, this is perfect. We'll stay right here. If we can see ourselves in somebody else's shoes, and sometimes realize even what we're going through is hard, there are other families that have a harder time as well. Also, it's helpful to view the positive contributions our children can make. A lot of times when we're in evaluations and assessments and later in the IEP system, it's really easy to focus on our children's deficits and areas that, they're this percent behind their typical peers. And, but I think it's helpful to view the positive contributions our children make to our families and to our communities. And I think our family loves to, laugh at the little things my son thinks are funny. or take joy in the people that have come into our life because of his contribution to our family, and just to see like how he spreads love and happiness to those around him. Next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about grieving, and I chose this graphic of kind of a spiral. I think we often think of grief sometimes as a stair step, or as a ladder, that when we finish one step of grief, one process or transition, we're done with that process. And these are really common, denial, anxiety, depression, guilt, anger, fear, but hopefully we can get to a place of transition and even transformation. I have been shocked sometimes at I obviously felt all of these things when our son was diagnosed, but I've been surprised at other times in my life when these feelings have come up. Sometimes it was around, when he was leaving high school and other kids were going off to college and he was still going to be in the school district system. And sometimes I anticipate some of these feelings again. Other times it surprised me was when other peers that I knew of his were getting their driver's licenses or going to prom, and my son isn't able to drive. He didn't know that he should even care about prom. I don't think he knew what it was. And so sometimes, watching other peers of his, same age, make some of those really normal, milestones of high school and growing up. Sometimes it's hard to feel those again. But I think it's important of kids with special needs and autism especially to know that this grieving cycle, I call it a cycle or a circle, is real, that these things, it's a very normal, process of feeling-based, feeling all these feelings, and that it's important to let yourself feel what you need to feel, and it's okay for yourself to grieve about a stage or a missed milestone. Next slide. The other thing I've realized about having a child with disability, I think in our society today we hear a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder, and especially among our service men and women. Post tends to imply that the trauma is something that happened in the past. And we know of people that experience various traumas in their lives growing up, in their work. But for parents, kids with special needs, I think the stress and the trauma is really ongoing and sometimes unrelenting. And so I like the term persistent or chronic traumatic stress. The traumas never stop occurring, really. And I think cumulatively, the secondary traumas can sometimes overshadow what the primary trauma is of getting that to know. For us, we never know what that next phone call is going to bring. Always gearing up sometimes for that next IEP. I get in all of our years of an IEP to feel like it gets like it's getting up for a fight a little bit. I don't really just, or when you notice that it's the school on your phone and you're like, oh great, what is it now? We just kind of are always anticipating some of those future traumas. I think, when the secondary traumas kind of build up, it doesn't take a lot to kind of, get over the edge. I read an example of a mom who spent a lot of time in the hospital, and going down to the cafeteria to get a little break at the hospital and have a meal. And when she got down there, the cafeteria was closed. And she said she barely made it back to her daughter's room before she just burst out in tears. Now, it wasn't the end of the world that the cafeteria wasn't open, but it was just like one more thing this mom had to deal with that felt too much. And so sometimes when our reaction to something that happens might seem like a lot, we might realize and have some patience with ourselves that, there's been a lot building up to this moment where we break or might seem to be overreacting. And then the thing I can't stress enough is getting connected with other parents. Peer support has been shown to be an evidence-based practice, that there is power in parent-to-parent support, and that's at the core of what Family Resource Centers do. And many of you don't live in the state of California. I can almost guarantee some family are similar to what we do there in your community and in your state. Peer support is shaped by that common experience of parents and with special needs, and it can provide both emotional and informational support. Again, there's just power in knowing that you're not alone and getting information from somebody who might be a little farther down the road than you are. And I just think it's so important, that peer-to-peer support. Sorry, I can't say enough good things about it. It made a big difference for me in my journey. Next slide. And from a parent perspective for professionals, this is some of my advice. Meet parents where they are. Sometimes when you are interacting with the family as a therapist, a sitter, a nanny, a respite provider, a behaviorist, you don't know what else, where that family might be in the grief cycle. Those initial stages of concern and a diagnosis are really stressful. Families may be grieving. They might be blaming themselves for struggling to cope. And I also think it's important to value parents' input. As parents, we are the experts on our child. And if we have a bunch of fancy degrees after our names, we spend more time with our child. And so value what a parent can teach you about their child. Sometimes the parent might be able to share something about that child's likes and interests that may help you better engage and involve your child in what you're doing. And then collaborate with parents when challenges come up. I think we always know, early on, if there's something going on that isn't working or there's a challenging behavior child is experiencing, early on it's better to know than until it becomes much more of an issue. Collaborate with parents. They're there as a partner, whether it's in the IEP process or in any other kind of treatment the child might be receiving. Next slide. And this, I created, I think, format a little off in switching it to another a format, but picture your child with autism or a child with autism as the middle of this bubble. And then the different colors represent, different areas that they might receive services in. So in their medical insurance, which is those purple bubbles at the top, they probably have an ABA provider through their insurance. They're dealing with a primary care doctor, their pediatrician, and possibly also a psychologist who may be helping them manage medication and other mental health issues. Then there's school in the top right of the screen with the kind of greenish bubbles where there might be an occupational therapist at the school, a speech teacher, a special day class teacher, a general ed teacher that they're mainstreaming into, and then there might be, busing and other transportation that helps that child get to school. There might be state developmental disability services that are available. For us in California, that can look like you have a case manager that you're dealing with and somebody that's providing maybe respite services for your child or social recreational services. And then all the supplemental activities that a family might try to round out their child's day in their family life with. There's family activities, there's other children in the family. Oftentimes, families might be paying for swim lessons, music lessons, participating in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, social skills. We could add a bunch of other bubbles here. And especially that have a dual diagnosis where maybe it's autism and Down syndrome or autism and severe ADHD, somebody might have more bubbles springing off. And so as service providers, when you're working with a service provider, they're just one bubble of this massive landscape that the parent really is having to navigate and negotiate. Parents are having to have these intake meetings, fill out intake forms, complete assessments, have regular review in all of the different bubbles that are going on. And it's a lot for parents to juggle. And parents don't have to do it alone, but just know that, oftentimes parents are dealing with a complex landscape. Next slide. And in closing, there was kind of a follow-up piece. It's called Celebrating Holland, that I wanted to share with you for a quick minute before we take some questions. It says, I have been in Holland for over a decade now. For me, it's almost 2 decades, and it has become home. I have had time to catch my breath, to settle, to adjust, to accept something different than I had planned. I reflect back on those years of the past when I had first landed in Holland. I remember clearly my shock, my fear, my anger, the pain, the uncertainty. In those first few years, I tried to get back to Italy as planned, but Holland was where I was to stay. Today, I can say how far I have come on this unexpected journey. I learned so much more. This too has been a journey. I worked hard, I bought a guidebook, I learned a new language, and slowly found my way around this new land. I met others whose plans had changed like mine, and who could share my experience. We supported one another, and some have become very special friends. Some of these fellows had been in Holland longer than I, seasoned guides, assisting me along the way. Many have encouraged me, many have taught me to open my eyes to the wonder and gifts to behold in this new land. I have discovered a community of caring. Holland wasn't so bad. I think that Holland is used to wayward travelers like me, and grew to become a land of hospitality, reaching out to welcome, assist, and to support newcomers like me in this new land. Over the years, I've wondered what my life would have been like if I'd landed in Italy as planned. Would life have been easier? Would it have been as rewarding? Would I have learned some of the important lessons I learned today? And yes, Holland is slower paced than Italy and less flashy than Italy. But this too has been an unexpected gift, and I have learned to slow down and look closer at things with a new appreciation for the remarkable beauty of Holland with its tulips, windmills, and Rembrandts. Yes, over a decade I landed in a place I not had planned, yet I am thankful for this destination. It has been richer than I could have imagined. Thank you. And I'll take any questions. I know we have a few more minutes for questions.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was really inspirational, and I can very much relate with the, wanting to go to Italy and then you're ending in a very different place. I think we all have experienced that like aha moment that there's things that we cannot change, that we ultimately will come to terms, and we have our own choice on how fast we're going into acceptance and how long we're going to be stuck in the being angry. And it's almost like a stages of grieving that you're going through of that lost destination that you had all these expectations for, and then finding beauty in the new destination that you landed and make it yours and make it joyful. And that's what I personally found very, very rewarding when we do work with parents who have kids of all different abilities, those who have come to that place of acceptance and embracing the positive that comes out of that current situation. That brings so much joy to us to support the parents when they're getting to that stage, because it becomes a joyful, happy parent and a role model really for anybody that doesn't have any of the, disability or challenges to deal with in regular life. They get stressed out about things that are not that important in the bigger scheme, right? And so thank you so much for sharing that. One of the questions that we got ahead of time was, what would you share with parents to get themselves to that new place of acceptance from your past experience? What would you have wished somebody would have shared with you when you first figured out, oh my God, it's Holland?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, first of all, not beating themselves up over catching it sooner or not having that like you are now. And just to look at like one thing you can do to move forward in something. Is it making a phone call? Is it, spending 10 minutes looking up a website or finding out or connecting with another parent? And I would say connect with another parent as early as you can, through a family resource center, through Autism Speaks, through, things. I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's so great. Thank you so much, Hannah. Is there anything that you could share with our audience if they want to get in touch with? What's the best way to get in touch with you or to engage with the services that you guys are providing?
I'm happy to share my email and share what I can with other parents, help them get connected with other family centers. Maybe, I don't know if I guess I could type it in the comments, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of
great,
grateful messages.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah. I guess I don't see, I'm looking for a way to make a comment. I might be missing it, but I know Angela has my email and share it with everybody.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it is www.careparentnetwork.com, unique to our county, and I am happy to try to help connections with family resource centers where they.
Super. Well, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you and
have a great
collaborating. Super.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.